Welcome in. Good afternoon. Yeah, it looks a little bit different in here. Just a little bit. Jeff Parles, Ryan McCormick. We'll bring Chris Andrews in a little bit. It's Sports by the Book Football Frenzy. We are in, what are we calling it? Studio B, the basement, whatever we want to call it here. We're going to be down here these afternoons the next 2 weeks while the rodeo is in full swing in the afternoon upstairs. We're grateful for all of our friends who come in for the rodeo. Make it as fun of a 2 weeks as it is here at the South Point. So, Ryan, we got a good football game here tonight. Ryan, still, even though it's gonna be pressing about 80 degrees by the end of the show in here.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
You're bearing the elements.
Yeah.
With the suit and tie. So, credit to you on that, for sure. We do have a Monday night game. We have a lot that happened this weekend, so we will bring in our good friend Chris Andrews right now. Chris, let's start with tonight. First off, love the hat. The hat is.
There's a rodeo this week? That's the way we always dressed in Pittsburgh. What are you talking about?
The Chris, for everyone at home right now, wearing the rodeo hat across the board.
Vest.
Your vest even has your name on it.
Yeah.
It's very impressive.
Thank you.
It's all out, all ready to go. Chris, let's just start with tonight. This is probably one of the weaker primetime games we have left, but the Broncos have been this pleasant surprise this year. No one expected them to be a playoff competitor. Heck, they had a win total of 5.5 or 6, depending on when you bet it. And here they are tonight, as opened just about a touchdown favorite, and now tonight still sitting at I'm looking at Ryan's computer. We're so close down here. 6.5 on the Denver Broncos here tonight against the Cleveland Browns.
Well, I haven't seen any 7s. I have a feeling we might get there, though, because all the money, we got a lot of stuff riding. This was not a good week for the bookmakers. I talked to a couple other guys. Some mixed results on Saturday, but yesterday was just the public won and won big. So we got a lot of pending stuff, as usual, going into the favorite tonight.
Well, I guess we'll go to the weekend that was, Chris, and
Okay.
let's backtrack to yesterday,
Okay.
where let's give the Eagles their due. Let's give the Eagles their due first. They go on the road, they get in a 9-0 hole, and after that first quarter, they dominated the Ravens for the most part. Yeah, I know Justin Tucker missed some kicks, but you know what? It didn't matter. I think the Eagles still would have found a way to win that game, even if Tucker makes all of his kicks. And now, Chris, I know Kansas City continues to win, but I think Philadelphia and Detroit pretty clearly the class of forget just the NFC, the class of the National Football League entering the final month of the season.
Yeah, I have right now. I have Detroit at the top of my table, Philly 1 point behind them, Buffalo a half point behind them.
Okay.
And listen. We're not just picking like winning games, or we're picking point spreads. And I had to lower Kansas City a bit. They don't cover a lot of numbers. I've been saying from the beginning of the year, you get pretty good value betting against them at home because they seem to get that padded number a little bit. But you could bet against them on the road sometimes too. And right now, I had to make that adjustment. They're just not hitting on all cylinders, and I know. Sometimes it's hard to overlook some of those things. I've talked about Georgia or talked about the 49ers, and I think we got to throw Kansas City in that same conversation.
It's interesting on the KC front of things where you're in a scenario now where they keep winning. They just keep winning. I hate to bring up one of your teams that ended up not being particularly good. That 2020 Pittsburgh team, that was the last last undefeated team, and that was Baker Mayfield, and Cleveland went there and smoked them in the playoffs. But I think it's closer to that than it is to last year with Kansas City, because remember, Kansas City was flawed as heck last year throughout the whole year, but they were healthier on defense as the year went along. They've gotten worse on defense because of injuries, especially Watson in that secondary. And Chris, we talked about this the year that Kansas City lost to Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl. Kansas City's offensive line, by the time they got to that Super Bowl, was done. Kansas City's tackles are both have been very bad for the most part this year. That's what scares me, and I think your adjustment is right. I again, mine rankings are not as scientific as yours, but I moved Kansas City down to 3 this week with Philadelphia and Detroit clearly in front of them.
Well, I think those two are clearly in front, but I think I got to put Buffalo in front of them.
Yeah,
Too.
I had them tied actually.
Yeah, I got Buffalo. I don't have the exact number in. Well, let me see. Yeah, I got Buffalo about 3 points better than them. You know,
Okay.
on home, especially at home, they're very good at home. You know, but yeah, I think that if Kansas City has to go to Buffalo again, I think they're going to have a tough time beating this team. Of course, you do have Patrick Mahomes, and the guy has done. I mean, he's been a magician, and you got to give credit where it's due. But I remember, I go back a long time before you guys. Tom Brady, of course, didn't win. I mean, he won 7 Super Bowls, but he lost 13. Well, we're not. I don't mean
that he ended up not winning.
That he didn't win. And that guys was, Bradshaw. Bradshaw won 4 Super Bowls. God bless. What he didn't win about 7.
Right.
We can say the same thing about Joe Montana. So I mean, I think Mahomes is getting himself in that conversation, certainly. But it doesn't mean he's going to win every year. And I think it's one of the years he's just not going to win.
Yeah, I mean, you go into just how their offense has been missing pieces all year, whether you're losing people in the running back room, you're losing people in the wide receiver room, and you get you got Rashee Rice back this past week, right? And he hasn't been it's 1 week back, so you're expecting him to go to what you're used to him being towards this end of this season. But when you're looking at the division and you have the Chargers immediately behind you and the Broncos who have a third of their cap space in dead money, like those two teams are showing that they're on your heels, not just for this season, but for years to come. And so if you're the Chiefs, I think you have to, make some additions or get more from your defense than you have the last few weeks.
I think it's more, and again, the defense. We talked about this the first 2 months of the season. The Chiefs' defense was arguably the best unit in the NFL through the first 2 months, and now that again they should have lost on Black Friday. There was no reason the Raiders should have blown that game, and the Raiders did what a poorly coached team does and finds a way to lose. Yeah. Still not quite what Eberflus did. Now, adios to him.
Good riddance.
But it's so interesting in this league, Chris, because usually in the month of December, it's like, it's moving month. We still have a lot of time to go. And it feels like if Denver wins tonight, which they are obviously favored to do, I feel pretty good about the 7 teams that are going to make it in the AFC. And then on the NFC front, Detroit's good. Philadelphia's good. Minnesota found a way again to win yesterday.
Right.
They're going to be in. Green Bay, same deal. Washington stabilized the ship nicely against a bad team. We just don't know who's going to win the NFC South or the NFC West right now, but I think we have a pretty firm idea on 11 of 14 right now in the NFL. That doesn't happen this early in the season usually.
No, but you are right though. This is moving month, and let's see who stays healthy, because a lot of times that's you talk about that Kansas City team a couple of years ago missing their offensive tackles once they got to the Super Bowl. I mean, that spelled doom for them. And if you remember, they were a 3.5 point favorite in that game.
Oh yeah,
nobody really paid attention to that. Until afterwards. Now, all of a sudden, it's really come to the forefront how important. We've always known how important the offensive line is, but I think that really accentuated it in a lot of people's minds, and that's something to really watch. And a lot of times it's those guys you maybe never really heard of. And all of a sudden there's 2 or 3 of them missing from your offensive line, and there goes the continuity, because a lot of offensive line play is coordination, and continuity certainly has a lot to do with that. So. I think you're right as far as, probably 11 of the 14 are, look pretty solid. But before you go crazy betting either Buffalo or Detroit or Philly, I'm not saying to be a bad bet, but, they could fall apart easily just with some injuries,
Well, look at Philly last year.
Look at Philly
best record in the NFL entering December, and then they were the worst team in football other than Carolina by the end of the year. So, look, it's the NFL. We all know it. Things one bad injury stretch, and quite frankly, for Thursday night, and we'll be back here on Thursday afternoon. Detroit's defense is banged up like crazy right now.
Right.
And that is it's actually a regular week for both them and the Packers. They both played Thanksgiving, but that is not a great matchup to have when your defense is so banged up like Detroit is right now.
Well, I think, again, if you just look purely at power ratings, Detroit should be a much bigger favorite.
Yep.
but then you start getting into it, and their defense showed that, you start missing corners. We talk about offensive line, corners, especially in this league now, the way receivers get kind of babied, you better have some good corners. And right now, I think there's some legit questions about the corners for Detroit. Matter of fact, I saw some sharp money show up on the dog, which I thought this number would go up, but maybe it won't. Like I said, I know at least one sharp guy that did play the dog. He's not a huge mover, but he's an opinion whose opinion I respect.
Right now, sitting at 3.5 on Detroit on Thursday night. What a great Thursday night game!
Should be a great game.
Two of arguably the 6 best teams in the NFL. Now, Ryan has Green Bay at 13 and 1, so that's a requirement there. Let's go to college.
Okay.
So I'm fascinated to see, and Ryan and I will do our best to figure out what we think the committee will end up doing when it's all said and done. A little less than a little less than a week from now. It's Sunday. We find out the bracket right before those NFL kicks. Ohio State losing to Michigan. I know there have been bigger upsets this year. I understand that, but that was a flooring result.
Yeah.
That in a year where Michigan had no quarterback play, their defense was injured. Their 2 best players didn't play in the game. Loveland and Johnson both didn't play because of injury, and Johnson, again, getting ready to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. And they still walk into Ohio Stadium and win as a 19.5-point underdog. Get that, Chris, I know that rivalry goes in streaks where it's one way or the other is dominating usually for about a 4 to 8 year stretch, except for the Hayes and Schembechler years.
Yeah.
But that was, of all the results this year in college football, that was the most shocking to me.
Yeah. God, I'm terrible with names. Everybody knows it. Lloyd Carr, was that the Michigan coach?
Yes.
And he lost a bunch in a row.
Yeah.
Wound up being it was really a terrific coach.
Just couldn't beat Ohio State.
Beat Ohio State. Now you got May, who's, how many programs in this country would love to have Ohio State's record, but they can't beat their rival? I mean, it's not just an aberration, because it just keeps happening. I hear a lot of guys saying he might have to win the national championship to keep his job, which is,
it
might be
Chris.
true. Yeah, it might be true.
Ryan Day is 66-10, but he's 1-4 against Michigan.
4 of those losses are to Michigan. That's not acceptable. But that was a huge upset. And really, when you look back on it, Ohio State, they were outplayed, they were outcoached, they were out everything. And I don't know how you can make an excuse for that. You really shouldn't. Although you had Gus Johnson saying they were 23.5-point dogs.
Nah,
and I tweeted out, I guess he talked to a bookmaker in Columbus, because that's the only place where you can get 23.5 on Michigan, I promise you. But that was a huge game for the Michigan program, really.
My only question is, if you do fire Ryan Day, who are you going to go hire?
Well, that's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
He can't be Michigan, but he had you in position, has had you in the playoff the last several years. It's just you need to win the big games, and he hasn't been able to do it.
I will say there is no rational thinking when it comes to losing that rivalry.
No.
There isn't. But look, the Ohio State friends that I know they're usually ticked off. They were ticked off the last 3 years. I've never heard one of my friends like he was after the game on Saturday. You would have thought there was a lot more going on than just a football team losing a football game on a Saturday. Let's just go with that. But that was the biggest result. And then the chain reaction with that, Ohio State, who was locked in, if they just win that game, it's them and Oregon in the Big Ten title game.
Right.
Winner gets the 1 seed, loser gets the 5 seed. Right. Now, Ohio State might not even get a home playoff game. And Penn State is playing for a Big Ten championship, despite losing their only game to a high-end team. But here they are. They did exactly what Indiana did. They took advantage of their schedule, and they won everything on their schedule but the Ohio State game.
Well, Franklin's another guy they talk about firing, and you look at his record, and it has not been good against top teams. Like I said, I was always a Bill O'Brien fan. I wish he had never left. But once again, you fire Franklin, where are you going? Who are you going to put in there? Yeah. And just to back up a little bit, we hear a lot of guys saying that about Mike Tomlin, last year. And, some of that really carried some weight, even with me a little bit, but I kept saying, you're looking for a guy with playoff success. Right now there's like one guy, Andy Reid. Every other guy that you can mention is iffy. Every other guy. John Harbaugh, okay, he's won one, so did Tomlin.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going down the list. I mean, how many guys have won more than one that you'd say, oh, I'm going to put all my eggs in that basket and get rid of Mike Tomlin? I said Andy Reid. I don't think he's going anywhere.
I'm trying to think.
And don't forget Andy Reid with Philly. He was where Tomlin is now.
Yeah.
He can never win the big ones.
I'm trying to think how many active head coaches have won a Super Bowl in the NFL. It's just 5, right?
Yeah.
It's Harbaugh, it's Reid, it's Tomlin, it's McCarthy, and it's Doug Peterson, right?
That might be the.
I think that's the
Peterson might be on a.
Oh, Peterson's dead man walking. He's gone.
It's never been.
I think that's right.
McVay.
6.
Oh, McVay. Yeah. Okay.
So 6 then.
Yeah.
Because Shanahan's never won it. Jim Harbaugh's never won it. So, yeah, see how much we all remember that Rams-Bengals Super Bowl then, right? That was very recent. All right, Chris, before we let you go back upstairs, just from the college football landscape here, entering this last week, where this is the tightest conference championship week from the lines since they've started doing the conference championships. Right now, McCormick, just because your odd screen is working and mine's not, Tulane and Louisiana are the only favorites north of 4.5, correct, at the moment?
Tulane 5.5, and then Lafayette is -5.
Yeah, so
What are we at with Boise?
Boise is a -4.
So every other game is lined 4 or less so 7 games 4 or less, 2, and it's neither of those games are touchdowns. Just a very competitive week coming ahead, which will make for an unbelievable betting card, even with the short slate.
Yeah, I can't wait till Friday night. We got a good slate Friday night. And then Saturday, forget about it. It'll be fantastic. So we got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So it's going to be a good 5-day run. I hope we as a book do a little better than we did in these last 5-day runs because this was pretty ugly.
Oh, it's going to be hard to cap what happened over the weekend, though. I mean,
well, I hope we cap that red figure that I'm looking at on my sheets. Hope we have capped that. Of course, I saw one guy. He had what did he have today? He had a 10-teamer. Every minus. Every game was a minus. Every game. So I got it. I'm going to show it to Michael Glenn. These are the guys beating us. What do you want me to do?
Nothing you can do in that.
You just take the bets. I did, like I said, I texted one guy. He says, yeah, what are you going to do? He goes, just the public's beating us.
Well, as you said, Chris, you just pat the guy in the back and you tell him, I'll see you next week.
Next week. That's all you can do.
Absolutely. Chris, pleasure as always.
All right, guys.
Thanks for meandering down here.
Keep cool.
I'll do my best.
I don't know how Ryan's going to be changing the wardrobe for Thursday, I would say.
Good chance.
For sure.
All right, guys,
Chris,
that's a good show.
Thank you, Chris. Chris Andrews, everyone. All right, let's go to tonight, Ryan. What do we got updated numbers-wise here on the Denver Broncos hosting the Cleveland Browns? Cleveland, of course, coming off the win last Thursday night.
Yep.
Long rest for them. The Broncos, one of the better surprises in the National Football League. With a win tonight, they'll have win number 8 on the season. No one expected that going into the year.
Yeah. Some people, I know I was very adamant at the beginning of the year that Bo Nix didn't have a chance to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, and I am eating those words.
We're both wrong on that.
Yeah, Bo Nix is very much in the conversation to win that award, but currently right now, -6.5 on the Broncos here at the South Point, total at 41.5. Open 5.5 on the Broncos to 6.5, and total staying where it opened at 41.5.
So the weather in Denver is unbelievable.
Yep. We even got Joey B in our chat letting us know.
Well, Joey B want to set an over-under on the weather temperature at kickoff. But the fact that you're getting, by the way, this is the first Monday night game with fans at Mile High in Denver since 2018, which is kind of shocking in all honesty.
Yeah.
But remember, if it wasn't for the Jets' existence, Denver has the second longest playoff drought in the NFL. They haven't been to the playoffs since they won Super Bowl 50.
Since Peyton Manning
which
left.
is pretty amazing when you think about it for how consistent that franchise has really been up until this 9-year stretch. This has been one of the most consistent franchises in in the National Football League since John Elway got there.
Yeah.
So, it's so weird that this is like, oh, this is a big game, but yeah, this is a big deal. 44 degrees at kickoff with no wind. You are not doing better than that the first Monday of December. And with that said, since it's a complete opposite of what Cleveland played in last Thursday night, whereas the total snow globe, I think this is Denver running away with this game, which should probably scare everyone since we know my mini Dar will say I hate the Broncos more than I hate anyone, which is not true, but it's okay. But this is the type of offense the Denver defense takes advantage of. Slow down Cleveland with Nick Chubb, who is, again, still working himself back from the horrible knee injury from last season, and make Jameis beat you. And you know what? If Jameis beats you, so be it. You tip your hat, and you know what? Jameis Winston is still a talented NFL quarterback. But more likely than not, Jameis Winston's throwing multiple interceptions in this game. And if you're Denver, you just take full advantage of that. I think the Broncos win by 2 touchdowns at least. I wouldn't be shocked if this is even like what we've seen with the Broncos against bad teams, where they just really put it on you. Wouldn't shock me if this is like 31-10, 31-13. Wouldn't shock me one bit if that happens tonight.
Yeah, no, and you had really set it up perfectly with one of your opening statements. Is this is kind of the exact same handicap as it was last week. If it was just nicer weather in Pittsburgh, we would have thought the Steelers. I mean, I know it's a divisional matchup, and we expect those to be a lot tighter. But on paper, the Steelers are so much better than Broncos, or so much better than the Browns. On paper, the Broncos are so much better than the Browns. I mean, you look at the Broncos defense, and they are top 3 in opponent yards per play. They're first in the National Football League. Opponent points per game, they're second in the league. Opponent yards per game, they're third in the league. Opponent yards per pass attempt, second in the league. Opponent yards per completion, second in the league. And sack percentage, they're second in the league. None of those things favor this Cleveland Browns team at all. And the only thing that I think helps the Browns in this scenario is that they do have Jameis Winston as their quarterback. If it was Deshaun Watson and we were in the beginning of the year, this is a 100% -6 on the Broncos. We would see the touchdown already that Chris had mentioned that he anticipates this going to. But with it being Jameis and him being the wild card of all wild cards in the National Football League, the 30-30 season, just him having no care for the jeopardy or the danger of throwing the football. Jameis sees an open window, throws it to the open window, doesn't care how small that window is. Jameis is going to sling it, and we'll go into the props here in a second. But another thing I think is really key for this one is the Browns have nothing left in this season. They're going, these final 5 games of the year, they're going to be dream killers for teams that they have to play out the rest, because the rest of the teams on their schedule, let's see, they've got in Denver tonight, in Pittsburgh next week, versus Kansas City, in Cincinnati, versus Miami, and then finally in Baltimore. So every one of those teams are trying to stay in the playoffs, trying to earn a better position in the playoffs, and the Browns have a matchup against them and are going to be, hey, we're going to bring you down to where we are because we have nothing else to play for. And then if you're the Broncos, yeah, they're 7-5. They're third place in their division. They've won back-to-back games. Bo Nix is, again, firmly in the Rookie of the Year conversation. But they have 5 incredibly important games, including tonight, still in the schedule. They've got their bye week this next week, which is huge because both them and Indianapolis are on their bye week, and they play each other in Week 15, which could be for the 7th seed in the AFC playoff picture. And then they've got the Chargers division matchup, the Bengals, another seed for playoff position, and then the Chiefs again. So these last 5 games for the Broncos here, incredibly important, and it starts tonight. Got to get the win.
Yeah, I would say this for Denver, where you win tonight, you're 8-5. You're going to be an underdog. Probably going to be an underdog in minimum of half of those games, unless if Kansas City's completely taken the foot off the gas pedal, which they could have. They could. It depends on what happens down the stretch. If they need the game to hold off Buffalo for a 1 seed or not. Could be a dog against Cincinnati as well. It wouldn't shock me if that ends up being the case. But
on the road.
Yeah, but look, this is credit to Sean Payton, because Bo Nix at the beginning of this year looked like he didn't belong in this league.
Yeah, well, the first two games of the year, he had 2 picks in each.
He was horrible. He was horrible. He was horrible the first 5-6 weeks of the season. And now, Bo Nix, again, I think yesterday kind of just put everyone back on track with Jaden Daniels again for offensive rookie. But Bo Nix is legitimate number 2 at this point in the offensive rookie of the year race. And I did not expect that to even be remotely in play this year, and that is on the coaching, where Sean Payton has really done a tremendous job to get this Bronco team that I thought was at least another year or two away from being competitive, probably into the postseason this year for the first time since 2015. All right. Anytime touchdown market tonight, Ryan McCormick.
Yeah.
Everyone's plus money.
Everyone is.
We got no laying of prices tonight. And you want to make sense of the Denver backfield? You want to make sense of that
You
here
go
tonight?
ahead and try
Want
it.
to do that? There you go right now. Plus 135 on Javonte Williams. Plus 160 on Sutton. Yes, I know he's not in the backfield, but he's their best weapon.
Yep.
The other backfield mates for the Broncos, Jaleel McLaughlin is a plus 320, and then Estime at plus 360. Good luck trying to figure out the Denver backfield.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings me to basically saying, you know what, I'm just going to take a shot on the longest shot on the board, and that's Audric Estime. Plus 360 would be the only way I'd look at Denver anytime touchdowns. If you want to take Cortland Sutton at plus 160, I can't get on that either as well, Ryan.
Yeah, for me, looking at the Denver backfield, I tried to go look at snap counts, and Estime kind of seems like he's losing the snaps the last few weeks. And McLaughlin really looks like he's the one taking carries away from Javonte Williams when Williams does it to himself and makes himself lose carry. Like, I don't think Sean...
Turnover guy.
Yeah, right. When he puts himself in a position to lose snaps, Sean Payton has no problem taking those away and giving them to Jaleel McLaughlin. But Cortland Sutton, I would like tonight. Nick Chubb, I have no problem with tonight. But the one guy I do like at a higher than plus $2 is David Njoku. Cortland Sutton is going to be followed tonight. And then on the other side, Cortland Sutton is a Bronco. So Jerry Jeudy is going to be followed by Pat Surtain. And then Elijah Moore is going to be followed as well. So I like the tight end for the Cleveland Browns, David Njoku, to score a touchdown tonight. The Broncos are allowing over 5 yards per reception to tight ends. So I do like David Njoku tonight. I also do like Devon Vele, another pass catcher for the Broncos, wide receiver there. If you're looking off of the favorite of Cortland Sutton, Devon Vele, he's had a increasing role the last few weeks, especially because the Broncos have been throwing the ball at a top third rate in the National Football League the last 3 weeks. So
Cleveland end of things, I don't know what to do with them. The receivers all basically, it's just who's going to be the big one that night. Is it Jeudy? Is it Elijah Moore? Is it Cedric Tillman? Last week we bet wrong when it was really Jeudy last week as opposed to Tillman.
Tillman's going to be out. He's got the concussion.
So then that is not even a worry tonight. But with Jeudy and Elijah Moore as the two guys that you're really looking at here tonight, plus 195 and plus 295 respectively at DK. Of course, all odds subject to change if you're watching us right now. I don't know what to do on this. Do you just take a shot on Jerome Ford and hope that he gets vultures a goal line carry from Chubb at 5-1?
Yeah.
Or does Jameis Winston score for the second?
that one, yeah. I don't know if I like Jameis to be a vulture again. I do tend to think Nick Chubb will find the end zone for a third time in the last 2 weeks. I think him scoring twice last week, getting over the 50-yard mark, getting over his attempted carry prop last week, he just adds confidence to a running back that has been a top of the league running back for X amount of years in years past. So he just needs to come back from injury. And I think the two touchdowns last week and then the touchdown the week or 2 weeks prior, just adding confidence for Nick Chubb, and would have no problem if you wanted to play that tonight. If we want to look at his prop numbers, that 15.5 carries gone over in 3 of the 5 games he's played this year. The only time he went over on that rushing yards prop was last week. So again, bringing back his confidence. His longest rush attempt at 13.5 yards, only over in 2 of the 5 games he's played this season. And again, touchdowns in 2 of the 5 that he's played this season. And then you're also looking at Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku on the graphic. So Jerry Jeudy has gone over that 4.5 catches in 4 straight games with Jameis Winston as his quarterback. He was 6-5 across the whole season, but 4 straight overs on the receptions and the yardage for Jerry Jeudy with Jameis Winston as his starting quarterback. And then his longest reception at that 21.5 over in 3 of the 4 games with Jameis The only time he didn't was against the Chargers, and he had 6.6 yards per target. That was the only time with Jameis that it's been significantly under 10 yards per target for Jerry Jeudy. So I like the over on his props. I know our guy Frank Nicotero on the morning show does like Jerry Jeudy as well to go over, but Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku, I do like over on their props. Njoku is really a bounce back week because we saw him go under against the Steelers last week and several drops and caught the one 2-point conversion that was the most difficult catch.
He made the hard catch. He didn't make the easier one.
So but 6-2 on this season for his over on receptions again. The lost last week. One catch on 5 targets. So expect a big bounce back for David Njoku. And that's all I got for the Browns side.
On the Broncos side of things, really kind of a hard running backfield to talk about. We talked about this earlier with the end of the touchdown market. You kind of just have to pick one of the three and hope it's the one that gets the bulk of the play in this game. All three running backs have attempts that are less than 10 yards, so the books don't really even know exactly. Yep. So be very careful with that. Courtland Sutton has turned back into the number one wide receiver that he was for a portion of his NFL career. He probably has a big night here tonight. But you like Veli tonight, the young gun, now really has turned into the number 2 wide receiver for the Broncos.
Well, I mean, I have no problem with Courtland Sutton. He's gone five straight overs on his receptions
Is that
and
good
targets.
If you're betting the over?
Since having no targets and no receptions in that game versus the Saints. Yep. So once they realized, we have a guy that can make plays for us. He's a real wide receiver 1. Why not? Let's use him as he's meant to be used. And so we've seen that the last 5 weeks as, again, 5 straight overs on the receptions and the receiving yards for Courtland Sutton. But I do like Devon Vele for the overs on his receptions. It's only 3.5. He's getting much more usage the last few weeks. And Troy Franklin hasn't been seeing the field as much as we thought he would going into the year. So Devon Vele is getting those snaps, and I do like the over 3.5 receptions because he's 5-3 to the over this season. And then his longest reception prop is 16.5. Don't have any real side there except the juice is the -125 to the over. He's 4-4 this season. So not a big play on the longest reception over, but could see it happening for sure.
Quarterback-wise, real quick, Jameis Winston tonight to throw an interception, sitting at -170 at DraftKings. Yeah, that's about right. Last week, I almost made it on the no interception. Almost made it, and then Jameis threw it right to the defensive back, which was very unfortunate. But there's nothing here for me on these quarterbacks tonight. I think everything is properly priced on the way of Winston and Knicks. Winston, 35.5 attempts, juiced over, 22.5 completions, juiced under. 236.5 on the passing yards, flat both sides, passing touchdowns, over 1.5 juiced on the under, interception -170 on the yes, rushing, passing plus rushing yards 248.5. Everything's right on the Jameis front and the Bo Nix side of things. 31.5 attempts, 21.5 completions, 223.5 passing yards, 1.5 passing touchdowns, plus 110 on Willie throw a pick. I think all these numbers are fair tonight, and I wouldn't touch them, Ryan.
Well, so I think what we need to look at is the recency with these teams. So both teams in the last 3 games, they're both throwing on over 60% of their plays. The Browns are doing so because they've needed to stay competitive in these games. They have a -33 point differential their last 3 weeks. The Broncos are still passing on over 60% of their plays the last 3 weeks, but they're doing so because they don't have much of a rush game the last 3 weeks. They have a +40 point differential, but again, are passing on 60% of their plays, so that's not sustainable, not reliable. You're going to need to rely on your ground game, and the Browns defense, we saw last week, is susceptible to that, so maybe that's a good spot here for the Broncos run game. But talking about the quarterback play, Bo Nix has gone over his pass attempts of that 31.5 in 4 of the last 5 games and 4 of 5 games at home this season. He's 8-4 to the over across the entire season. Talking about his completions, 2 and 3 at home this season, back-to-back overs. So the first 3 home games all were under. The last 2 home games, both over. 4 overs in the last 5 games for that completion prop, getting plus money, 21.5 completions for Bo Nix. Looking at his pass yardage, 223.5, which is what the Browns allow average per game. Bo Nix is 4-8 this season, has gone over in 3 of the last 5, and has gone over in 3 of the 5 at home in back-to-back games at home as well. His touchdown prop plus 105 to 2 touchdown passes tonight. He's 4-1 this season at home, 3 straight overs, and again 4 out of the last 5 he's gone over. His interceptions, 4-8 this season. Again, like I had said earlier to Jeff, 2 interceptions in week 1, 2 interceptions in week 2. Has only had interceptions in 2 of 10 weeks since then. So 2-8 since week 3 on Bo Nix's interception prop. And then if you're looking at his rushing yardage, rushing props, anytime touchdown, I would be hesitant on it because in the last 4 weeks, really, Bo Nix isn't taking off. He only has 12 rush attempts in the last 4 weeks, which he had, I want to say 40 in the weeks prior. So not taking off as much as he should. Kenny White made the argument this morning that he's seeing the field a lot better than he was to start the year, which, again, rookie quarterback, that makes a whole lot of sense. But now looking at Jameis Winston, I kind of wanted to go back because there is some familiarity between Sean Payton versus Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston was the number 1 overall pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, played against Sean Payton for several years as a divisional rivalry, but Sean Payton is a offensive head coach, so not his scheme versus Jameis Winston, but the team versus the quarterback that he's playing against. Sean Payton is 5-3. Let me make sure I got this stat right. 3-6. Jameis Winston is 3-6 straight up against Sean Payton, 3-6 against the spread against Sean Payton, and the total is 4 overs, 5 unders in 9 games for the Saints against the Bucs. And then I wanted to look at Sean Payton just specifically on Monday night. Sean Payton is 19-9 straight up on Monday night, 13-15 against the spread, and the total is 16-12 in those games. And Sean Payton as a home favorite, at least this season, 3-0 straight up, 3-0 against the spread, 2-1 to the over. And as the Broncos head coach, 7-4 straight up, 6-5 against the spread, 6-5 to the over. So.
Yeah, that's actually a little bit better than I would have expected because New Orleans obviously much better than Tampa when Jameis was there. Of course, Tampa started beating New Orleans when Brady got there, right. So a little bit different on that. All right, let's bring him in. Our good friend. Scoot in. We can't. We're team no commercial here today. Our good friend Vinny Magliulo joins us right
Gentlemen.
now. So Vinny, Ryan and I are going to hold our projected college football brackets for after we talk to you here for about 15 minutes.
Okay.
We got Chris's perspective of everything. What's your perspective of what happened this weekend in college football?
Well, it's kind of nice down here.
Nice and cozy, the cozy confines here, Vinny.
I feel like I'm back in Grandma's basement, hiding from chores. So there's a few things, right? And again, committee has their job to do, and I'm not, going to critique it. But as always, listen, there are going to be teams in the playoff that are not ranked power rating wise from our perspective than teams that are out. Okay, Mississippi is going to be higher rated. They're probably not going, right? Let's face it.
They're done.
Right? So they're going to be. They have a higher power rating than a couple of schools that may very well go. Okay, like a Boise or a UNLV. So to me, though, it's like, and Chris, I'm sure said something similar or the same thing, is just give us the matchups and we'll give you the numbers.
We'll know the matchups on Sunday,
and we'll know them. So, but I think if you are definitely in Alabama, you are absolutely rooting for
SMU.
Clemson to go down. Yeah. You have to be, right? You're an SMU fan. Because if Clemson beats SMU, SMU has a better shot at an at-large bid. Okay, certainly you're probably rooting also for Boise because they would have only one loss, right? So again, what happened the last couple of weeks created chaos, and I think you're looking at some teams that still have an outside shot that are playing real good. Again, we talked about it for the last month. Who's a very dangerous team right now, and has to be at least given some consideration, and it's got to be South Carolina, right?
So my whole thinking is at this point, I think Ole Miss is done, even though I actually think Ole Miss is the best of the three teams from the SEC that technically are somewhat alive.
Who the other? You have
between Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss. We're all on the outside looking in going into this week.
Right.
I think Ole Miss is the best of the three, but Ole Miss has probably the two worst losses of the three.
Yes.
Kentucky is far and away the worst loss of the three teams, and then
at home.
And then there's an argument of, is Alabama's loss at Oklahoma or Vanderbilt worse than the loss at Florida? Yeah. There's some arguing on whatever. Yeah. You're splitting hairs with those three teams, basically. If we're going off current form, South Carolina's in the best form of maybe any. Forget those three teams. They're in the best form of anyone in the SEC right now, including Texas and Georgia. To me, that's how
current form, but they would be a dog to both of those
teams.
Right?
Yes, 100%. But going off current form, South Carolina would get my nod personally if we're going off of what the team has turned into by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what you said. Clemson, the committee could get completely bailed out if Clemson beats SMU, because then there's really no decision to me. Even though SMU would be an underdog to all three of the teams that we just mentioned on a neutral, I don't think the committee is going to penalize teams that are in the conference championship games that were already in the field and lose. So that's good for SMU, and that's good for Georgia. The loser of the Big Ten title game was making it regardless. Boise's the only one that doesn't really work for it, because if they lose to UNLV, they'll fall out, and that will be that.
Yes.
But I think SMU's in. I don't think it matters what it is. And it goes back to what you just said, where for Alabama or South Carolina or Miami, if the committee wants to put a second ACC team in, which I don't think they should, SMU's got to win in order for that to happen.
Well, I think when you look, right, we know that the Power Four winners are going in. So there's four right there. There's a couple of teams that are probably at large bids right now. Indiana, at large.
Yes, I think Indiana's not even going to be debated about when it's all said and done.
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame
at large.
Easy.
Right?
Yes.
Ohio State, definitely rooting for SMU.
I think they're in already.
Right? But more than likely, they'll have an at-large bid. So, again, for us, the best thing is that we've got this format, and these games are going to be extremely popular. They're going to be bet very heavily, and we're certainly going to book them accordingly, just like NFL playoff games, because the appetite is there.
Oh, yeah.
We know that everybody that's healthy is playing, right? There's no opting out of these games for the most part. I don't see it happening. No. Okay, so that's a good thing. When we get to the bowls, that's going to be a whole separate set of circumstances, because there's going to be so many opt-outs for a variety of reasons. But I think the playoff is good. But those are the perspectives there. My top four power-rated teams right now are Texas, Oregon, Ohio State. I've got Georgia and Bama about to pick them. Even Notre Dame and Penn State, they're right up there. Those last four that I mentioned are real close.
Notre Dame showed me a lot on Saturday.
Yes.
Because their defense did not have their best stuff. And they bared down when they had to. They, of course, if you had USC 7.5, you were pulling your hair out by the end of that game.
Oh, yeah.
Mayava throwing 2 pick sixes in the red zone.
Right. But for 100 yards, back to back.
Yeah, back to back. And then, of course, USC scoring to lose by 14 to make it even, to put salt even more in the wound. But It's so weird with Notre Dame because they're always so front and center. They're always so high profile.
Yeah.
Because of the early loss, which, by the way, how big of a favorite is Notre Dame today against Northern Illinois?
35, 36.
Yeah, so an even bigger favorite than when Northern Illinois beat them in week 2 by 8 points, no less.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is just quietly under the radar here. Power rating wise, I know they wouldn't come up as one of the 2 or 3 best teams, but with the right draw here, if they avoid Oregon, if they're on the opposite side of Oregon, right draw, they could make the national championship game.
They could. I think the difference too with this Notre Dame team is a lot of size, more speed than we saw them. With was it Manti Te'o? That this is a much better team than that team.
Yes, it is.
And I think they get that first round game at home in all likelihood too.
I would be stunned if they
right.
don't.
I'd be real surprised. So it's going to be great. Now these games this weekend are going to be great. They're going to be a lot of fun too. These games, to book these games, and folks have already started to bet them, and there's been quite a bit of support. I can give you some of the moves.
Well, this is real quick before you do that. We were talking about this with Chris. We have 9 games this weekend, conference championship games. The biggest favorite is not even a touchdown this week.
That is correct. The biggest favorite right now is Tulane, who's up 2 points to 5.5.
And a pure road team, no less, is the biggest favorite this week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that game is at West Point. Yeah. Money has shown for Jacksonville State, which is also home this week, and they're up to 4 from 3.
As we all expected, no Liberty in that title game.
No, yeah. Boise is holding steady as a 4-point favorite on the blue turf against UNLV. Arizona State up a little, but it's a half point, 2.5. That game's in Arlington, so neutral site there. Next game for the MAC in Detroit at Ford Field, where Miami O is drawing a little bit of early attention. They're up to 2.5. And Texas, Georgia. They took the field goal with Georgia. This one I think will be a toggler for the most of the week. This is down to 2.5 right now. That game in Atlanta, the Marshall and Louisiana game. This one's at Lafayette, so Louisiana is the home team here. This game's up. This game's gone back. This has had quite a bit of action, maybe the most action so far. Open 4, got as high as 5.5, and now sitting at 5. So
we had to go to the computer to figure out who would host the game as well.
Yeah, they did. Yes. Yeah, good point. That's why we had to wait to find out who the home team was before we put the number up. SMU holding steady at 2.5 against Clemson in Charlotte. That game's up, by the way, a point in total to 56. And then Oregon holding steady at 3.5. This game in Indianapolis against Penn State. So and that totals 50. So lots of good games this week too.
I'll say this: as of this moment, the Big Ten title game is my favorite bet because I think Penn State's going to get waxed. I like Oregon.
You like Oregon in that game?
It's the same old story with James Franklin, right? He's gonna. We know he destroys the mediocre teams. Now he step up in class in a big way. Neutral. Now it is. This is a weird one actually because Oregon first year in the Big Ten. It's a heck of a trip from Eugene to Indianapolis, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I wonder, since they've had a 3-week head start on knowing they're going to play in this game,
right?
I wonder how that fan base is going to travel, especially with a potential. Well, forget if they lose, they'll get a home game. But the winner of this game goes to the Rose Bowl. Automatically, we know the Big Ten champion will get the Rose Bowl, regardless of what seed they are. We know that.
As a playoff game, by the way. The bowl games that are...
So the way it works quarterfinal-wise, Big Ten champ is going automatically to the Rose Bowl, regardless of seed. The SEC champion, because they'll be higher than the Big 12 champion, regardless of who it is, automatically to the Sugar Bowl.
Okay.
If SMU wins and gets a bye, they're automatically going to Atlanta for the Peach Bowl. And then whichever team gets the bye between the Big 12 champ and the Mountain West champ would get sent to the Fiesta Bowl in New Jersey.
In Arizona.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're Arizona State, you're very much rooting. If you can win this game, you can get the bye and get the home, basically a home game in Phoenix.
Well, you brought up a key point, too, though, Jeff, about Penn State. Now, don't forget, if we just mentioned, if we think that Indiana and Ohio State are at large, if Penn State loses this game, so that means you're thinking both of these teams are in. So the Big Ten is going to have more bids. They're going to have 4 bids.
Yeah, I think
Potentially more than the SEC.
I think it's
right?
I think it's not even a question that the Big Ten's getting 4. Yeah.
A month ago, we were talking about the SEC having at least 4 or more, right? And the Big Ten only having maybe 2 outside, maybe 3 at the most. But right now, when you look at this, the way things have played out in the last few weeks, particularly the last 2 weeks, quite likely that 4 Big Ten schools will be in the playoff.
I think at this point, we'll go through our brackets in a few moments for what we think will happen next Sunday. But I would be shocked if there's not 4 Big Ten teams in there at this point. And really the big question is going to be, assuming chalk prevails in that Big Ten title game.
Which I'm sure, the Big Ten, whether they're playing or not, they're all rooting for SMU.
Oh, well, I mean,
there's a lot more teams rooting for SMU than not. So go ahead.
Well, you know what? I wonder on that, actually. I'm going to play devil's advocate real quick because if let's say I'm Penn State, okay, and I lose the Big Ten title game, I have them as the 7 seed, but there's a realistic shot that they could still get the 6 seed. Would you rather see Clemson or would you rather see South Carolina? I know my answer.
Clemson. I mean,
I would
about it.
of the potential playoff teams, Clemson is the one. Assuming that I can't draw Boise State, Clemson is the next team I want to see, even over including Iowa State and Arizona State. I'd rather see them over them at this point, but we'll see how it all plays out.
Do you see any scenario where there's not 4 Big Ten schools?
Oh boy. I just don't, because in that case, then Indiana's the one who gets screwed. And I think the committee is so cognizant right now of just their surroundings with everything that if they put in that circumstance, we're knocking Indiana out for 9-3 Alabama.
Right.
Well, I'm not so sure. That's why what I'm saying is these schools are rooting for SMU because they want to take it out of the committee's hands.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'll say this: if Texas A&M had won, then this is a
whole different scenario.
This is a whole different set of circumstances. Then
imagine if Texas A&M had won and Georgia Tech. I know Georgia would still be in the SEC championship, but imagine if Tech had pulled that game off.
I will say,
and then you have 4 different teams from the SEC, 5 different teams from the SEC with 3 losses.
I will say, in that circumstance, then I think the SEC title game would have been a playing game and a loser's out. I think that would have been the only time where having the extra game gets held against the loser, and I think that would have been the case on that one. So, all right, Vinny, thank you as always,
gentlemen. Good job. I'm gonna go hang around in the facilities department. It's kind of nice down here, peaceful.
Vinny Magliulo, everyone. All right, Ryan, you ready to look at our projected brackets entering the final week of the college football season before we know who's going to the college football playoff? So I'll be quick here on mine. My projected 5 conference champions then end up with automatic bids. Oregon, they get the 1 seed. I have Georgia winning the SEC championship game and hopping SMU and getting the number 2 seed. SMU I have at number 3. They win against Clemson on Saturday night in Charlotte. Boise State beats UNLV in what I think will actually be the best championship game of the weekend, period. They win and sweep UNLV to get the 4 seed. Arizona State, I have winning the Big 12 title, but they stay at number 12 like they were in this past week's rankings. So now the question mark becomes, who's the last SEC team? And how does the committee handle the losers of the conference championship games, assuming Texas is the loser, and then, of course, Penn State or Oregon. Oregon will get the number 5 seed if they lose. Penn State's a little more convoluted. 5-12, I have Texas just moving down from 2 this week, which will likely be their ranking in this week's rankings, to 5, hosting Arizona State. I have Notre Dame staying at 6 the whole way, and I have them hosting South Carolina. Now, I think the committee is going to see Alabama and just at 9-3 with a bunch of other 9-3 teams, along with a win over South Carolina, and likely say, all right, we're taking the big brand. We're taking them. I don't think that's right. I think Alabama's the weakest of the 3-loss SEC teams that have a legitimate shot here. South Carolina, Ole Miss being the other two. But that's why I put South Carolina against Notre Dame, which would be a very interesting game in South Bend if we got that. I think that'd be a lot more interesting than Notre Dame Bama. I think Notre Dame would beat Bama by 2 touchdowns personally if that
Really?
Yes.
Oh my.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I would bet Notre Dame for sure. All Big Ten matchup in the 7-10. Indiana gets in as the 10. Penn State is the 7. And then this is actually, I think, going to be the hardest thing for the committee. Because I think Ohio State and Tennessee are pretty much on their way being 8-9, unless a Penn State gets drilled by Oregon. Then the committee could justify putting Ohio State ahead of Penn State because they beat Penn State heads up in that scenario, and we get the Ohio State-Indiana rematch again. I give the nod to Tennessee because the Arkansas loss is better than the Michigan loss. Even though Arkansas ended up with less wins than Michigan, that was a touchdown spread. That was a road game. It was a weird spot for Tennessee off of beating Alabama. And I think they want to they're going to give the nod to Tennessee for the home game over Ohio State in that circumstance in the 8-9, which, by the way, if Ohio State wins that game, that's not particularly fair to Oregon, but that's the system, unfortunately, for the Ducks, where they could arguably be Ohio State, Oregon, in the Rose Bowl with 2 of the 3 best teams in the country, even with that result last week against Michigan.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of right there with you. I have the exact same 8 and 9 actually. Just my only argument for why Ohio State would be the 8 instead of Tennessee, which I know I have Tennessee as the 8 instead of the 9. But my only argument would be that in every one of these brackets, in every one of these polls, Ohio State has been that highest remaining non-champ. They've been that 5 seed for every single bracket or every single release that they've done of this. So I think that they'll have them a little higher than they do, or could have them a little higher than they do Tennessee, or at least seeing that 8 and 9. But getting into mine, I have the same 1, 2, 3. Oregon is your Big Ten champ, Georgia is your SEC champ, and SMU is your ACC champ. Last week I said UNLV would go into Boise. That would be the reason that Ashton Genty doesn't win the Heisman, which is an entirely different conversation. He should win the Heisman, but disappointing that he's not going to. Anyway, I do think UNLV goes into Boise, beats Boise State. They become the then 5th bid, getting that 12 seed. Arizona State would win the Big 12, get that final bye week, get the 4 seed. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, Oregon, Georgia, SMU, Arizona State. And then I still have the same 7-10 as we did last week. I think this matchup of Notre Dame, Indiana is just I get what you want to do with the Big Ten versus Big Ten. That makes a whole lot of sense. Just one team prove it to move next conference to move on, right? But I think this Indiana versus Indiana in-state rivalry could be really fun for the playoff. And then Penn State, I would have higher than Notre Dame, even though they lose the conference championship. To your point of the committee not punishing teams that lose these conference championships.
I'm very curious to see what the committee does do, especially with Notre Dame in at 11-1. Right. Like let's say, well, if Texas beats Georgia, Notre Dame is going to be ahead of Georgia. We know that. Yeah. Actually, Georgia will be the most fascinating seeded team to see where they're seated of anyone if they lose to Texas this weekend. But Penn State with 2 losses, again, losing the Big Ten title game versus Ohio State with 2 losses, I think is actually the biggest seeding debate that could end up happening if Georgia beats Texas this week.
Yeah. It would very much be a conversation. And you could flip those two, and because you do have the Ohio State head-to-head win over Penn State. That Ohio State going down to Michigan was the biggest biggest chaos creator for this bracket. And then I do think Alabama, with a 3-loss SEC team getting into this bracket, which I don't think should be the case really, period. But again, we want to get the best teams in this playoff to see the best football. So I think Alabama, being that the fact they do have that head-to-head win, they are the bigger brand, I do think the committee would opt to put them in over South Carolina, even though I do 100% agree with you. South Carolina is the more terrifying opponent at their current point of the year.
Yeah, it would be if South Carolina gets in, and look, the betting markets right now are telling you Alabama is going to get in, assuming Clemson loses to SMU, which is really the whole ball of wax here. If Clemson beats SMU, I just have a hard time seeing the committee. They might push SMU down to 12. Like they might make them say, all right, you know what, you're gonna have to go to
Right.
you're gonna have to go on the road to a really difficult opponent week 1, but we're still putting you in to the playoff. That is more than possible here with SMU if they lose to Clemson. And then it'll actually be interesting because in that scenario, Clemson probably would be seated behind both the Big 12 champion and the Mountain West champion, which would then there would be
In that case, if it was Boise,
assuming it's Boise, yes, correct.
they would not be.
Well, you know what?
You think they would be behind you? Well,
They probably wouldn't.
at that point, it wouldn't be UNLV. It would be Tulane. And then I could see them going behind Tulane. Even though
They wouldn't be behind Tulane. I don't think
if,
Tulane would.
if Tulane had beat Memphis, there'd be no question.
well, yeah,
But then losing to
100%.
Memphis, yes, now there
No,
is a
the
conversation.
American champion's not getting there. The game on Friday night in Boise is a playing game. Whoever wins between UNLV and Boise is going. I feel pretty confident on that at this point because of Tulane's loss to Memphis last week. And you can't put a 10-1 Army team that lost by
Right.
45 points to the only reasonable team they played this year, where especially when Boise State went to Oregon, lost by 3,
Right.
and UNLV beat Kansas in Kansas, beat Houston in Houston by margin, and quite frankly should have beat another team that's in a power conference in Syracuse if the refs didn't get involved. So,
And had a chance to beat Boise earlier this year.
they're clearly the top 2 options at this point. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what happens, though.
That it will be. Yep.
So before we go, Ryan, it's been an active day in the chat, and we have our 2 poll questions as well.
Yeah, we had a poll wondering what you guys thought of which team wins tonight's Monday Night Football game. 82% of our viewers think the Denver Broncos get their 3rd straight victory and getting more in the playoff push. And then we had which player do you like for an anytime touchdown tonight between Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Devon Vele, or other, and you had to comment. And Sutton, Jeudy, and Vele all tied. Equal amount of votes for all 3 of those guys. So all 3 of those guys are scoring touchdowns tonight.
Or none of them
is what our
Sorry,
chat is saying. Let's go with the first one.
Legitimately the same amount. Wow.
Yeah, 20.
Very good.
27%.
27-27. Very good. All right. We're back here on Thursday on this show. 3 o'clock, Ryan and I get you ready for arguably the best Thursday night game of the year with Green Bay and Detroit coming up on Thursday night. But in the meantime, the next 2 days, Alex White, Kenny White are here at 9 a.m. right on the channel. Get you ready for the day in all the sports on Tuesday and Wednesday, and, of course, also on Thursday morning as well. I'll be there with our good friend Dwayne Colucci at 9 a.m. on Thursday right here on the channel. Ryan, good luck. True Dog, Jerry, and thank you, as always. We will see you again next time right here on Football Frenzy on Sports by the Book.